Okay, here you go. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. And today is our sixth webinar for the Big Committee at the ICF Saudi chapter. Today, we are hosting a very special guest, Carrie Abner, and she will be talking about what's new in the ICF credentialing, update to the ICF credentialing exam. And here you go, some little bio about Carrie. From dealing with Carrie, she's an amazing human being as a start. She's the Vice President of ICF Credentials and Standards, experienced association executive. She has advanced professional association locally and internationally. She has a passion for bringing together diverse communities of practitioners. She has different roles, government, voluntary, and we are so glad to have her. Very grateful that she accepted our invitation. And Carrie, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Rehan, for the warm welcome, for the invitation and the opportunity, and to you and Sarah for your leadership within ICF Saudi Arabia. It is such a privilege and an honor to be with you all, and many thanks to each of you for taking time out of your busy days, evenings, mornings, wherever you are in the world, to join today. It's always a treat for me to get to talk about one of my favorite topics, which is credentialing. It's something that I really love. It's a passion for me. So it's a pleasure to be able to come share a little bit about what is happening and what has recently happened within ICF Credentials and Standards to continue to elevate standards and to enhance the candidate experience. We know that credentialing is an important milestone for so many coaches around the world. And we want to make sure that it's rigorous, but we also want to make sure that the experience is a positive one that supports and honors the candidates who go through the process. So with that, I will go ahead and share my screen. We'll get started. But as we get started, I would love to hear from you all, either through chat or if you want to unmute yourself, either way. If you are considering going through the credentialing process, in the process of going through the credentialing process, ready to take an exam, kind of where you are in relationship to ICF credentialing. I'd be curious to hear where you all each individually are within your credentialing journeys. Okay. Rehan hits. Oh, perfect. Got it. Yeah, you're ready to take the exam. Perfect.
Yes.
Hi, Carrie, can you hear me?
I can. Yes.
Hi, welcome. So I'm working towards the SCC at the moment.
Okay.
I've just recently completed the mentorship with a colleague from Henley in the UK, and I currently work as an internal coach in a large hospital in Jeddah. Thanks.
Wonderful. Excellent. Well, thank you for joining, John, and we look forward to supporting you in your ACC pursuit. Excellent. Thank you for all of the great shares here. This is great. In the process, Tariq is in the process of getting the ACC. Several of you already have your credentials, which is fantastic. And one thing that I know from working with so many great coaches from around the world is even those who already have started their credentialing journey or have gone all the way through to the MCC, one of the most meaningful and impactful things that I have witnessed is that coaches turn around and lend their hands to those who are coming up behind them in their own individual credentialing journeys. So helping to develop new coaches as they hone their skills and get ready to apply for an ICF credential. And so thank you all for being part of this conversation today. It's a relatively small group, so we can be very informal. If you have questions as I go through the presentation, please feel free to either raise your hand or unmute and ask your question. I'm happy to stop and answer any questions along the way. And hopefully everyone can see my slides at this point. We'll go ahead and dive in. So I do have a bit of an agenda, and this is mainly to keep me on track, so I don't start talking about all kinds of things, get distracted. We'll start today with an overview of the ICF credentialing exam. That'll be the main focus of our conversation today, or some recent updates and changes that we've made to the exam. But we'll start with a high-level overview of what the exam is, how it was developed. We'll talk a little bit about the exam format, which is called a situational judgment exam, and why that's important. We will definitely go over some recent changes and improvements that we've made to the exam just last month, why we made those changes, and how those updates are designed to support and enhance the experience for candidates. And then we'll also touch on, at the end of the presentation, some resources that are available to coaches who are either considering or in the process to earn a credential and take the exam. So we'll share some of those resources with you as well. Okay, so just a little bit of an overview of the ICF credentialing exam. It was launched in August 2022, and it was truly designed to assess candidates' ability to apply the updated ICF core competencies and code of ethics into daily practice. So it's really about assessing a candidate's ability to make complex decisions and judgments in the process of coaching. It was developed in alignment with global standards for certification assessment development, and there are many standards that apply for that. It's a very statistically sound exam. So we run a lot of statistics to make sure that it's a very valid and reliable assessment tool. But one of the most important elements of those global standards for certification assessment development is that we include coach practitioners, subject matter experts from around the world in every stage of the process. And it's quite a lengthy and multi-phase process. That means that coaches are involved at every single step of the way throughout the development of the exam. You see here a visual of the exam development process. Many may not realize what goes into developing a high-stakes exam like the ICF credentialing exam, but it's quite involved. It's typically about a 2-year process. Ours was just a little over 2 years in the development process, partly because we were developing it during the pandemic. So we hit some of the challenges that everyone experienced during the pandemic in terms of project management. But it starts with a job analysis where we ask coaches what it is so important for them to know or to be able to do to be an effective coach. We completed that job analysis process at the very end of 2019, and that resulted in the updates to the ICF core competencies. Subject matter experts are also involved in everything from identifying the content that will be featured on the exam. So what elements or domains of coaching knowledge and skill will be reflected on the exam, to item writing. Coaches are involved in the item writing process. There are multiple stages of review of individual items once they're drafted, and coaches are involved in every stage of that review process as well, from technical accuracy to cultural relevancy and bias and sensitivity reviews, to linkage of items back to the core competencies to make sure that they are assessing exactly what they were designed to assess. At the end of that process, the entirety of the exam is reviewed. And again, that is conducted by coach subject matter experts. So it's coaches who are involved in that process as well as pilot testing. We had more than 300 coaches pilot test the ICF credentialing exam before it was launched in August 2022. And so Coaches help to inform that. We run a lot of statistics after a pilot testing process, so that we can select only those test items that are that demonstrate performance levels of validity and reliability. So we only select items that are good indicators or measures of a coach's knowledge or skill. Finally, we also include coaching subject matter experts to determine the passing score, or what we call in the certification business the cut score of the exam, so that coaches look at what it is for a coach who is just hitting the standard of competency and proficiency. To what degree do they need to perform on the exam in order to be considered competent and earn that credential? At the end of all of this, we had more than 1,300 coaches who were involved in the all of these processes, from the job analysis through the development of the ICF credentialing exam. And as a result, it really is an exam for coaches by coaches. So many coach practitioners contributed and informed the exam and its content. So I talked a little bit about the blueprint or the exam specifications, and this is what we mean by that. And coaches help develop this content domain or their blueprint for the exam. This is an outline, essentially, of what the exam includes in terms of proportion of exam items. As you can see, it's pretty evenly distributed across the ICF core competency model, with only slight differences in percentage of items at the competency level. But for the most part, it's a pretty even distribution of items. Now, let's talk a little bit about the exam format. It is a computer-administered exam. It can be taken at home or within a Pearson VUE testing center. Either way, however, it is what we consider a proctored exam. That means that candidates are monitored to make sure that they're not bringing in any prohibited items, resources, etc., while they're taking the exam. And this is so important for certification bodies. It is actually a requirement for certification bodies that want to seek accreditation as a certification program, to ensure that every single candidate gets a fair chance at being successful in the exam. It's there to ensure standardization and fairness and equity for every candidate who sits for the exam. And we are, as an ICF body, committed to our rigor and standards, not only for the coaches that we credential, but we expect the same for ourselves. So we are seeking to meet or exceed global standards for certification practice. And this is one of those standards. It also helps preserve the integrity of the exam. We'll talk a little bit about exam security in some of the slides ahead. But the proctored examination ensures that, again, every candidate has a fair chance at being successful at the exam, and ultimately that preserves the value of the credential that coaches work so hard to earn. The format of the ICF credential exam is what we call a situational judgment test, or a situational judgment exam. So how these are set up, and we are one of many certification bodies, and many employers are also beginning to use situational judgment tests as part of the hiring process. But what an exam like this tests is not just an individual's knowledge in a certain area or domain of practice, but rather their ability to apply that knowledge in realistic situations or contexts. So in the case of the ICF credentialing exam, this exam is designed to assess a coach's ability to make critical decisions and judgments based on the ICF core competencies in the complex context that they experience every day in their practice. These items reflect and present several plausible response options to a given scenario and ask candidates to identify the best action and the worst action as it relates to the ICF core competencies. It's way more nuanced than a simple multiple choice knowledge test, which is designed to just assess an individual's knowledge of specific data or right and wrong facts. Rather, it does require the candidate to actually take knowledge and apply it to practice, to make really difficult judgments and decisions in the context of the profession itself. That's much like the experience that coaches experience every single day in working with individual clients. So a little bit about the format of individual exam items. Again, candidates are presented with a scenario that describes a realistic coaching situation. And all of these scenarios were actually written by some of those subject matter experts that I mentioned earlier on as part of the development process. Coaches provided over 300 different scenarios that they wrote themselves, that they had experienced themselves, that served as the foundation for some of the exam items that are featured on the ICF credentialing exam. From those scenarios, candidates are asked to identify the best action of the 4 response options presented and the worst action or the least effective option of the 4 responses presented. So let's talk a little bit more about how this is designed and framed in the exam itself, and then we'll look at a sample item just to give those who haven't encountered the ICF credentialing exam a sense of what that looks like on the exam itself. The scenario really sets the stage for the question that follows in terms of what is the best response and what is the worst response. The scenario describes, as I mentioned, a very realistic coaching situation. And candidates are challenged to notice what is going on in that scenario. What is it that the client is presenting? What is it that the coach is noticing as part of that scenario? And what competency is truly at the heart or the core of that coaching situation? And then apply that analysis to identify the best action of the 4 responses provided, or the worst action of the 4 responses provided. And here's an example of what that looks like on the exam itself. This is an illustration, but it is what we call a drag and drop exam. So the candidate will read the scenario, read all of the response options, and then drag one of the response options over to the best action box and one of the response options over to the worst action box. We do have variations on this exam format for candidates who may need a different format, who may not be able to complete a drag and drop exam. So there is a multiple choice version of the exam for those candidates who need that kind of accommodation to support them in accessing the exam. And candidates earn 1 point for identifying each best and worst action. So a candidate can actually earn 2 points for each of the scenarios that are presented on the exam. Those correct best and correct worst response options are identified by coach practitioners. Again, as part of that exam development process, workshop panels came together to identify which were the correct responses for each of those item categories or response categories. During the exam, if a candidate wants to come back to an item and review it before they submit their responses, they can do so as long as they're within the same section. They can flag an item, and then when they get to the end of that section, they can come back to it, review it, and consider if they want to change their response options before submitting their answers for that section. We use a scaled scoring system for the ICF credentialing exam, and it is a scale of 200 to 600 with a passing score of 460. So it's not scores are not reported as a percentage like many exams, but rather a scaled scoring system. So let's talk a little bit about the 2023 exam statistics. We had almost 10,000 administrations of the exam in 2023. And of those administrations, 75% passed on the first attempt. An additional 12% passed on a subsequent attempt. So 87% of candidates ended up passing the exam and earning their credential. That's great news. That's really actually pretty high for a high stakes certification exam in terms of passing rates. So we're really excited about that. And early statistics for 2024 indicate that we may see an even higher pass rate as candidates become a little bit more familiar with the exam and its format. So that's exciting and good news as well. Okay, so we recently made some important updates to the exam, and I wanted to share some of those updates and revisions with you all today. But there is a question that we've received. You just launched this exam in 2022. Why do you want to make updates to it already? And that's really important for certification practice for a number of reasons. It is best practice to regularly, sometimes even annually, update a high stakes certification exam for a few reasons. One is to make sure that the exam items reflect current, up-to-date, relevant professional practice for that discipline. So refreshing the exam with new items on a regular basis allows certification bodies to make sure that any new knowledge or skill that is important for that professional practice is featured on the exam and is incorporated into the exam content. Refreshing exams also improves test security and integrity. So when you are refreshing an exam with new items, that helps build the integrity of the test over time so that you don't have to do a full replacement of an exam at any certain point in time. And that's the way that we are approaching our exam maintenance. We are refreshing a certain number of items on a regular routine basis, which will likely be an annual basis. So it's only a portion of the questions that get replaced every year. That helps to reduce item exposure. Over a certain period of time, an item will become less effective at accurately measuring a candidate's knowledge and skill. But by refreshing these items, it reduces that item exposure and keeps those items performing well over time. And also, exam maintenance is important because it allows us a chance to improve the candidate experience as well. So making formatting changes to the exam, small changes on the presentation of the exam items or the scheduled break, which we've done recently, can also improve that exam experience for candidates who will sit for the exam in the future. So that's some of the reasons why we refresh the exam. Let's talk about the exact changes that we made. We did include several new field test items, 50 new test items overall. These are unscored items. So we're pilot testing these items to measure their performance, to see if they perform well on the test, but candidates are not actually scored on these items. I will say that candidates do not know which are operational or scored items and which are field test items when they're sitting for the exam. And that's standard practice as well, because we really want to get an accurate measure of the performance of new items that are featured on the exam. Those 50 new test items are spread across 5 different forms of the exam. So each exam form will only feature 10 unscored field test items. We did reduce the overall number of items from 81 scenarios to 78 scenarios. And that allowed us to extend the scheduled break midway through the exam from 5 to 10 minutes. That gives our candidates a little bit more time to rest, stretch their legs, perhaps get something to eat, do whatever they need to do to refresh themselves and get ready for the second section of the exam. So we're very excited about that change that has been made to the exam. We also enhanced the screen presentation, how specific individual exam items kind of are reflected on the screen to help make it easier for reading and processing of those exams, particularly the scenarios that can be a little bit longer. So we've updated the formatting of how those scenarios are presented on the screen to make it easier for candidates to process and read those exam scenarios during their appointment. For candidates who are taking a translated version of the exam, we've made a huge improvement here that I'm very excited to share with you all. In the previous and the initial form of the exam, all items were presented in English, and a candidate could click on a button, a translation button, to see a translated form of that item. We have flipped the sequence on that in the updated exam forms. That means that if a candidate is taking the exam in Arabic, they will see the exam items and response options in Arabic first. They will still be able to access the English form of that item. That's helpful for many candidates to be able to compare and understand nuance in the language if they speak multiple languages. But they will see the Arabic version or the translated version of the item first, and then and be able to answer that item in their spoken language or their desired language. That's a huge improvement. We've also enhanced the score reports for candidates, and these enhanced score reports provide a little bit more information for candidates who need to take a retake of the exam. So candidates who are not successful in passing the exam get some feedback on their relative performance at the domain level. So the 4 domains that are present on the exam. That gives them a little bit more information if they need to engage in some continued studies or preparations for their exam retake. And this is an overview of what the exam kind of format looked like before we made these changes on August the 20th and after. So you'll see a reduction in the overall number of items in each of the 2 sections featured on the exam, as well as an increase to the scheduled break beginning August the 20th to 10 minutes. So some of the changes, the purpose of the changes that we've made, one, we wanted to really address candidate feedback that we have collected and been listening to over the 2 years that the exam has been in operation. We're very sensitive and we value that feedback. So we wanted to address a number of the inputs that we had received from candidates over the past 2 years. We wanted to continue to preserve exam security, so making sure that our exam remains a fair and valid assessment tool for coaching competence over time, and reduce the item exposure. So as I noted before, just in 2023 alone, nearly 10,000 administrations of the exam were completed. And so to reduce the chance that an item could become overexposed and no longer a quality item for our exam, we wanted to switch out some of those items. Again, we've also taken this opportunity to really enhance the exam experience through the scheduled break extension to 10 minutes, through the translated form presentation, and through just small features on the exam of how exam items are presented on the screen. All of those are really designed to make the exam easier to navigate and for candidates to have a more positive experience in what is naturally a very kind of stressful, anxiety-provoking experience when you're taking a high-stakes exam. So we wanted to make it as positive and meaningful as we possibly can. And of course, some of those changes also increase accessibility to the exam. Do we have any questions at this point before we dive into the next section on some of the resources that are available to support candidates as they're preparing for the exam?
Carrie, can I ask a question? It's John.
Absolutely, please.
Yeah, thanks, Carrie. I'm just curious, how do you actually collect the candidate's experience of the exam? Is that through, so written or any other means? I'm just curious. Thank you.
Of course. So we do that in two ways, John. One is Pearson VUE, our testing vendor, actually has a survey at the end of the exam in test centers. They are working to integrate a similar survey at the end of the exam for those who take the exam remotely through their remote proctored testing service called OnView as well. But they run a survey, and then we also run a survey with all candidates who complete the credentialing process. We distribute that survey on a quarterly basis. So someone who may have gone through the exam and taken it, whether they pass or fail the exam, if they have taken the exam in September, their survey would come out, I believe it's in November. But we run that survey on a quarterly basis with all candidates who have sat the exam. And we really rely on that feedback through our credentialing process survey to make improvements not only to the exam, but to the entirety of the credentialing process.
Thank you.
Of course.
Carrie, there is a question from Ayman.
Oh, great. In the chat. Thank
Yes,
you.
he said, how does it go when taking the exam in Arabic? Will the two screen be side by side? I think you said that Arabic will be shown first, but
Yes, that's correct. Thank you for bringing my attention to that really good question. So the item is presented on the screen in Arabic, for instance, if someone is taking the Arabic form of the exam. And then there's a translation button where if they select that translation button, a pop-up screen will pop up on the screen that shows, or I'm sorry, a pop-up window will present on the screen with the same item and response options in the original English form. They can close that window then, and they'll answer the question in the Arabic form that's on the main screen.
thank you, Carrie. There is another question from Rasha. She's thanking you for this webinar, and she said she has a question about working towards her PCC journey. If she were to reach 500 coaching hours within this year, can she apply for the PCC without retaking the exam?
Perfect. First of all, congratulations. That's wonderful news that you took and passed the exam on August the 20th. So you were among our first cohort to take this new version of the exam. And I'm happy to answer your question, which is yes. So if someone takes the exam and then applies for a higher level credential within 1 year, they will not be forced to take the exam again, because it will essentially be the very same exam. If they're taking it within 1 year, it will not have been refreshed. So if you take the, if you apply for the PCC within 1 year of your August 20th pass date, then you would not have to take the exam again. Good question.
Thank you very much. So if it is more than 1 year, they have to retake the exam.
Yes, if it is more than 1 year, they will have to retake the exam, but it will feature different questions. So it won't be identical to the exam form that they took before. Yeah.
And Dr. John, please go ahead.
Hi, so it's just John, thank you. So basically, if a candidate is unsuccessful at the first sit, what is the duration to when they can do the retake? Thanks.
Great question. So after the first attempt, a candidate must wait 2 weeks before they can sit the exam again. And then if they're not successful on the second attempt, which is most candidates who have to take a retake are successful on the second attempt. But if they need to take another attempt at the exam, at that point, they must wait 1 month before each new exam attempt. So they have to wait 1 month after the second attempt before they can take the third attempt. And that's really to support candidates to slow down and really engage in additional preparation and study.
Okay, thanks.
Of course.
Yeah, I think that's it for questions. Anybody
Okay.
else before we move on? No one.
Great questions. Okay, so let's dive into some of the resources that ICF offers to help candidates as they're preparing. One of the things that I will mention first and foremost is your coaching education, whether you completed it last year this year or 5 years ago, your preparation and your coaching education remains one of the very best resources, in addition to your experience as a coach. The updated ICF core competencies were reflected based on coaching practice. So as subject matter experts really help shape the core competencies and the updates to the competencies that were made in 2019 and are truly reflective of what coaching education providers are preparing students to be able to experience and to engage as a practitioner. So that remains one of the best sources of your preparation. In addition, we always encourage candidates to really review and become familiar with and integrate those ICF core competencies and code of ethics. So spend time with those core competencies and the code of ethics before you take the exam. All of the exam items are related to the core competencies and code of ethics. So that is really the foundation for the exam content. Also, John mentioned earlier that he's been working with his mentor coach at Henley. Engage your mentor coach to help with this, because mentor coaches really are there to help provide guidance and support to coaches in their development to reflect their competence and their alignment with the core competencies in their practice. So mentor coaches can be a really valuable resource in your exam preparation as well. And think about some of those common situations that you've engaged either with your mentor coach or just in your own experience or with a coaching supervisor, where you think about like what did the core competency, what was core about a situation and what core competency did it reflect? How could you have responded in a really effective way? How might you have responded in a way that wasn't very effective based on the core competencies in code? So think through situations and experiences that you've had in your own practice, as well as with your studies and your mentor coaching. We do have a number of resources on our website that you can take advantage of. I'm going to be sending Rahan this slide deck after the presentation, and all of these links are embedded in the presentation. So you can go to this slide and click on them and go to all different kinds of resources available on our website. But the core competencies, again, I will mention, and in addition to the actual core competencies on our website, we also have a series of videos that were developed when we updated the core competencies that we hear from candidates all the time have been so valuable and instrumental in their exam preparation. So check out those core competency video series. It's available on our YouTube channel. And again, it's linked right here. Same with the ICF Code of Ethics. We also have a Code of Ethics video series, which has been very valuable to a number of candidates in their preparation for the exam. We do have sample questions that are available on our website, and I'll talk a little bit more about those in just a minute, but they are illustrative of what the items or the questions will look like on the exam itself. They are not taken from the exam, but are very, very similar in their format and presentation to how exam items will appear during the exam experience. Let's see, we also have a white paper that I often refer candidates to on our website. It's the white paper on when to refer a client to therapy that can also be really helpful to candidates as they're preparing for the exam. A couple of tips when you're taking the exam for those who might have an exam appointment in your future. When you're reading a scenario, some candidates want to put additional details in the scenario. We caution candidates not to do that. Don't create a backstory, which can really change the dynamics of the scenario as it's described. So avoid doing that. Really focus on what is the primary focus of the scenario, and in particular, what is the primary competency at play in that scenario. Remember that the response options may not necessarily reflect what you as an individual coach practitioner might do, but those 4 response options are all representative of plausible responses to any given situation. There's no perfect response to a situation. There's no absolute worst response to a situation, but rather these are reflective of a continuum of effectiveness in responses. And those have all been generated and rated and validated by coach practitioners. When you're reviewing those response options, think about what is most closely aligned with the core competencies and which is the least effective or the least aligned with the core competencies or code of ethics. A couple of tips when you're submitting your application that can help you on exam day. So setting you up for success well before you sit for the exam. Make sure you include your name on the application as it's demonstrated on your government issued ID. There is a tab in the application where it will ask you for your legal name as it's presented on your government issued ID. And that is the name that needs to match your ID that you present to Pearson VUE on your exam appointment day. So please be careful to make sure that that is correct in your application materials. If someone needs an exam accommodation to access the exam due to a disability or other qualifying condition, there is a place on the application to note that an exam accommodation will be needed. And that will automatically trigger ICF to send additional information and instructions for requesting an exam accommodation upon submission of that application. So that's important too. It is critical that any exam accommodation request form and the required supplemental documentation is submitted to the ICF before an exam appointment is scheduled. Unfortunately, we're not able to add an exam accommodation to an existing exam appointment. So if you've already made an appointment and you discover that you're going to need an accommodation, you will be required to cancel that exam appointment and then submit the accommodations documentation. One thing that I cannot emphasize enough is be thoughtful and look through the options of taking a test in person versus taking a test online or remotely through Pearson VUE's OnVUE system. Having the remote option is a really important convenience that we offer to our candidates, and there are a lot of technical requirements that are really critical to an effective online exam. So please review all of the different information, including this decision tree guide that we include here, that we link here, before making that decision, because if someone has technical issues during their online exam, it can result in a terminated exam, and that's never a positive experience for everyone. So we want to set everyone up for success when they're making that decision for their exam appointment. On or before your exam appointment day, please be sure to gather up all of your identification, make sure that it's valid, it meets the ID requirements. We include here a number of exam FAQs and Pearson VUE FAQs, as well as videos that can help you for the exam experience, including the security requirements and measures that you'll go through when checking in for your exam, whether in person at Pearson VUE's testing center or through the online process as well. There are lots of great guides here to help you through that process. So please take advantage of these guides before your exam appointment day. And just general tips before your exam: get some sleep, allow ample time on the day of your appointment to get to the test center if you're testing in person, or checking in online if you're taking a remote exam. You'll need at least 30 minutes advance arrival time in order to account for and allow enough time for your check-in process, either way, whether you're in person or online. Make sure you have your IDs with you. They will require you to have your ID so that we can be sure that the person who is sitting for the exam is the actual exam candidate. And there are lots of instances when that's not always the case. So it's really important to be able to provide your adequate and valid ID. Make sure we do have some test instructions as the first part of the exam. So read through those instructions. Note that you can access the instructions for the exam at any point in the exam. So if you have a question that you need to go back to, there's a button that you can select for the exam instructions, and you can see those again. And just take your time. There are features within the exam platform that allow you to track your time and your progress on the items. If those are helpful to you, make sure that you use those during your exam time to keep on pace so that you can successfully complete the exam. There's also a guide for those who are considering a remote exam. It's called the Guide to Testing Online through Pearson OnView. It covers a number of really important topics like the security rules for testing online, the technical requirements for testing online, what to expect during the online testing appointment, and how to complete the required systems test to make sure that your computer is adequate to support an online exam before your exam appointment. This is a really crucial guide. So please, if you're considering taking a test online and we want to make sure that you have a successful testing experience, spend some time with this guide in advance of your exam appointment, or even in advance of making the decision to test online. I will say that the vast majority of our online tests are administered without a hitch and really smoothly. About a little over 90% of our exams are of our online exams are administered successfully. But if there is a technical issue, it can make for a frustrating exam experience. So we want to avoid that at all costs for any of our candidates. And we do have some new and exciting news that is available with the updates that we made in August, and that is the availability of a brand new exam tutorial. This is available, the link is included here on this slide. This is available on the ICF landing page of the Pearson VUE website. And what this is a 30-minute interactive exam simulation, essentially, that candidates can go into. It includes an overview of all of the features of the exam platform, so you can get used to the Pearson VUE platform before your exam appointment. It includes specific features of our exam, and it also includes the sample questions as they would appear in the Pearson VUE platform. So candidates can go into this free interactive simulation as many times as they would like before their exam appointment to get used to the exam kind of context and how it will be on exam day. We're really excited about this new tutorial, so I would recommend it to anyone who's considering taking the exam. So with that, that's the conclusion of the main presentation. Are there any questions at this point?
John raised his hand. Also, Rana asked about the link for the simulation, the exam simulation. You said it's embedded in the
It's
slide.
embedded in the slide, so it will be available. The link is right there in the slide, and we'll send that out after the presentation today. So yes, please take advantage of that. And John.
Yeah, I've got two questions, one which is a personal one for me and then a hypothetical one. The first one, I completed my coach training at the University of Cambridge. And as part of the program, the 60 hours, there was also 20 hours of practice with clients. Can I just confirm that those 20 hours are added to the additional hours that I'm actually accruing at the moment?
So as you're going through coach education, if the 20 hours of, it's a great question, and it's a kind of that we have some technical rules around that, John. So if the 20 hours of coaching experience, client hours, are conducted within the classroom setting with like one of your student peers, that cannot be counted against your experience requirements hours for a credential. But if, for instance, Cambridge required you to go out and find actual clients and experience coaching and practice your coaching skills with actual clients outside of the classroom, those can be.
Yeah, that's exactly what it was.
Okay,
outside perfect. Of the second question, how does ICF cater for candidates that may have neurodivergent needs or specific learning difficulties? And I work with some colleagues in the hospital that may have specific learning difficulties, such as dyslexia. So how does ICF respond to that? Thanks.
That's a great question. And some of the improvements that we've made to the exam format, John, are designed specifically with candidates who might experience different forms of neurodivergence in mind. That was at the forefront of our plans and goals for some of the updates that we've made. That's one of the reasons that we've changed the presentation of exam items on the screen in the platform. Previously, they were spread across the screen, and we've consolidated those scenarios into a more compact form that's easier to process and read and review during the exam experience. In addition, we offer a number of accommodations for candidates who have a qualifying disability, which can include additional time. It can include any number of things to help candidates, an extended break, frequent breaks during an exam appointment that's available within a testing center. So a number of accommodations that candidates can request, and provided they provide the required additional documentation that documents their disability, we can authorize them for any number of those accommodations that suit their specific and unique needs.
That's great. Thank you. This is a great webinar. Thank you, Carrie.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you, John. I have a question from Sarah, and two people raised their hands. Sarah said, thank you, Carrie, for the information shared. Are there any plans to differentiate between the 3 levels of certifications? I think she means credentials.
Yeah.
To test, for example, different passing scores or different pool of questions, etc. As this is a question I'm continuously asked as a mentor coach. So your answer is?
Great question, Sarah. And so one of the things, when we first developed this exam and we were going through the pilot testing process, Sarah, we hypothesized that we would see different statistical performance levels across the credential levels. So for ACCs who were taking the exam, we anticipated we might see different performance levels versus a PCC, for instance. We didn't see statistically significant differentiation in performance levels. So we don't have a differentiated cut score because we didn't have the evidence to substantiate that. I won't go into all of the statistical analysis of that, but it's quite rigorous and robust, the way that we help set those cut scores alongside subject matter experts. But what I will say is that earlier this year, we pilot tested a new exam for the ACC. Later in October, there will be another webinar with ICF Saudi Arabia, and I would encourage everyone to come to that because we may have some news and updates to provide on an ACC level exam. So one is coming in the near future. So we are very excited about that, and more information will be shared very soon.
Carrie, there are 2 people who raised their hands. Somebody called me. I'm not sure what's the name. I asked them, but they didn't answer. Also, Ayman. So me and Ayman, please, one of you go ahead. Thank you. All right. Ayman, can you hear me? Hello?
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much, first of all, for this marvelous, actually, and very valuable webinar. A lot of updates and very useful for our preparation for the exam. And it's my first webinar actually with you. So really thank you for everything, for your time, for your effort, and for the valuable information you provided us. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much for those kind words.
Thank you. And I don't know who is me, but please go ahead and ask.
It's me, Mu'taz.
Mu'taz, hello. Please go ahead.
Hello. So I need a clarification on the requirements. First, I completed 156 ACTP hours, including the 10 mentoring hours. So I only need the 100 coaching hours, and that's it. No performance. I don't need to submit any recording. Is that correct?
That's correct. So if you completed a full ACTP or level 2 program, you have already met the mentor coaching requirements and you met the performance evaluation as part of your educational program. So you won't have to supply those with your application. You will simply submit your certificate. You will complete the attestation of your experience hours. And then you will submit your information, including your legal name and all of that for the exam. And shortly thereafter, once your application materials have been reviewed and approved, you'll receive the invitation and authorization to sit for the exam.
Excellent. Does these hours and certification have validity or no?
Say that again. I'm sorry. I didn't catch the full
Does it have a
question.
validity? So do I need to take the
Oh.
exam within a year or two, or it's an open?
It's open. You will, the individual authorization to sit for an exam is for 60 days. However, if someone needs additional time, all they have to do is reach out and we will extend that authorization to allow for, scheduling an exam beyond the initial 60 days. So you don't have any specific time after which your authorization fully terminates. You can extend that out as you need.
I'm sorry, it wasn't about the authorization it was about the hours, the accredited hours and the mentoring. Do I need to repeat that?
So no, as long as your experience hours were accrued or completed after the start of your coaching education, they do not expire. So if you were to, for instance, apply for the ACC with your 100 client coaching experience hours, those same 100 hours would still count toward your PCC in the future, alongside the additional 400 hours of experience required for PCC. Does that answer your question?
I meant the training hours and the mentoring hours.
Okay, those do not terminate at all. So they will remain valid for the future. They don't terminate. Sorry about that.
No, it's fine. Thank you very much. I wasn't clear. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah, actually, that was good because you answered the 3 questions at the same time.
Perfect.
So, by the way, yeah, I think Lamia is asking the same question as Mu'taz. Lamia, did we answer your question? She's asking about do they expire the ACTP certificate?
Okay.
So you said, yeah. Also, you have lots of thank you messages, chats. Helpful and valuable webinar. Thank you very much. Great webinar. Thank you so much for the valuable insights. And thanks a lot. You have lots of thanks a lot, so one is enough.
Thank you all.
And,
it's been a pleasure to be here.
So glad to, but the hour it fly. So we are at top of the hour, and thank you so much, Carrie. If anybody else has any questions, I'm gonna forward these to you. And looking forward to having more webinars like this one, if you can.
Yes, absolutely. It's been an honor, and thank you so much, Rehan and Sarah, for the invitation and for all who participated. It's been a privilege. So thank you for the great conversation. If we can ever be a resource to you, please don't hesitate to reach out. Thank you.
Yeah. You have a last minute question. Can you answer this? Oh, 2.
Oh.
Do you have a couple of minutes for these?
Sure,
yes.
I do.
Okay, so Iman and Malih. Yeah, Iman and Malih, we are at the top of the hour. Can you ask your questions?
Yes,
Iman?
hi.
Go
Yes,
ahead,
Iman
please.
speaking. Yes, thank you, Carrie, again for everything. This has been very informative. I did an ICF level 1 training in 2009. I don't know if there were exams those days because I don't remember mentioning exams. So I got the certificate, but I don't think I was ever ICF accredited at that time. But right now I'm looking into pursuing another training course. And I was wondering, I'm seeing a few courses where they are combining level 1 and level 2. Would that mean that I could take just one exam for the PCC immediately, or do I have to take two exams?
Great question, Iman. So if a program or a provider offers both level 1 and level 2, typically those are arranged in like modules. So one might complete the level 1 program first and then go on and complete the level 2 module following. If you completed a level 2 program, you could apply directly for the PCC as long as you completed the experience hours. As long as you had the 500 experience hours, you could absolutely go ahead and just apply for PCC right away. You do not have to apply for ACC and take the initial, exam for the ACC first.
Okay, thank you. And just one more, another part, because I took my course or my training course in 2009, does that mean any coaching hours in that time being can be accredited towards the?
Yes, you would have to apply through what we call the ACSTH or level 1 pathway. So that does require a performance evaluation. But you could, if you wanted to use those experience hours, you could definitely do that is by counting that training as your start of your coaching education.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Carrie. Thank you for your time.
Yes, of course. Thank you.
Thank you. And we have Maliha. Maliha, we are glad to have you with us, the ICF president of the Kuwaiti chapter.
Thank you, Rehan. Thank you so much for the great webinar. Thank you, Carrie. I have please one question. As the ICF required at least 8 clients for level 1, 25 clients for level 2. I just want to make sure, is it 35 clients for MCC level 3?
That's correct. Yes, it's 35 clients. Yes.
As you mentioned, when you register for the training, you start counting the coaching hours. Is it applicable also for MCC? Because MCC required now more than 2,000 above the 500. So do we have to register for the training for MCC, then we count the 2,000 or what?
No, you can count all of your coaching hours from the very start of your coaching education. So if that was, 10 years ago, you can count all of the experience hours that you've accumulated since you started your coaching education 10 years ago. And that would count towards your MCC.
And there is a minimum time between the exam for PCC and MCC?
The only minimum amount of time required, one does have to earn a PCC before they can apply for MCC. And one does have to complete 10 hours of additional mentor coaching at the MCC level before they can apply for their MCC. So the only time constraint really is the 3 months for that mentor coaching. So if one earns the PCC, they can immediately start on their mentor coaching hours for MCC and apply for the MCC once they've completed those 10 hours of mentor coaching.
And the recording assessed by ICF?
Yes, there's 2 recordings and transcripts that are required for the MCC, and that's supplied along with the application materials.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Carrie. Thank you so much. Thank you, Rehan.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Hiba, last question, because we took more time from Carrie.
Thank you, Rehan, and thank you so much, Carrie, for today. I would like to ask you, since this is the first time I hear about the 25 clients, if I'm applying for PCC. So what if I got already the 25 clients, but I'm not done yet with the 500 hours? So am I going to be eligible to apply, or do I have to finish the 500 hours first?
Great question, Hiba. You do have to complete all 500 hours. And within those 500 hours, you have to have at least 25 clients represented for those 500 hours. So it's both. You do need to have both in place.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Of course.
Thank you very much, everyone. And have a great day, Carrie. Have a great evening, everyone from the Middle East. And a great day in other countries in the world. See you in other webinars. You're most welcome. Bye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.